Take a look here at the screen. So what do we use the WBS for? Let's talk about this a little bit. The WBS, in my mind, is a great way of communicating and being on the same page as your stakeholders. So the WBS defines the project scope. If you can see it on the screen here, it defines the project scope of work in terms of deliverables. It provides the project management team with a framework on which to base the reports. It also facilitates the communication, like I said, between the project manager and the stakeholders. It enables them communicate to be on the same page. When we're talking about a particular deliverable, we understand what the deliverable is and what the different pieces in the deliverable might be, what the sub-deliverables might be. Taking a look here. Also, it is a key input to other project management processes and deliverables. So when we talk about the word work breakdown structure, what are we really talking about? Your WBS looks very similar to a family tree, and that's because it falls into the tree structure category. When we talk about a tree structure, we're talking about something like this. Now remember, this is not to replace your studying of what the WBS actually is in the PMBOK. This is only to illustrate to you key things that you need to look out for as you are studying scope management. So for example, if we have a work breakdown structure that looks something like this, what we're doing is we are breaking down that piece of work into lower, more manageable pieces each step. We could have something like this and then go to a level such as that. Now, how many levels are in this WBS? If we count the levels, you'll see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels. So we could keep filling in these levels depending on how the project is structured, but ultimately this is pretty much what you're doing. You're breaking down the work into smaller, more manageable pieces. The lowest level of the WBS is called a work package. So if I keep breaking it down, I get down to the work package level. But there's some key elements in the WBS that you need to be aware of, and those key elements I will show you. So up here, we call that the root node. R-O-O-T, root node. The root node is at the topmost level of the WBS. Okay, that's your root node. We also have, down at the lowest level in the WBS, we call this lowest level the work package level. Work package. So we call it the work package level, and we actually call these elements at the lowest level work packages. So we've got the root node, we've got work packages. Now, between the root node and the work packages are two other elements to be aware of. These two other elements are known as, one, the control account level. Now, if you read in the PMBOK guide, they'll tell you that the control account is a management control point above the work package level that's used for reporting and better understanding the project. So above the work package level, if we make this, for example, a point in which we want to be able to track everything in that branch, or everything in that branch, or everything from here down, we could call this our control account. So assume this is called control account A. Everything that falls under the branch of control account A, right, can be tracked through understanding, for example, what is the health of A in terms of your SPI, CPI, CV, SV, not for the entire project, but only for control account A. Because when you take a look at this project, you could find out how well A as a phase or deliverable, depending on how you broke down the WBS, you could find out how A is doing. The same way, if we call this B, maybe the health of B is different from A. Maybe B is doing well, A is not doing well. You know, so we call that a control account. So I'm going to remind you of that here, control account. Okay, so I've talked about the work package, I've talked about the root node, I've talked about the control account. Remember, the root node is above the control account level. The control account level is above the work package level. But there's also another component I need to show you. And that other component is below the control account level. So we're talking about an element in the WBS that is below the control account. That element is known as a work package. So I'm just showing you an example here. For example, we could make that a planning package. And what exactly is a planning package? A planning package is a WBS component which has known work content which has not been decomposed. So we know how many hours of work, how much it's going to cost. That's in that planning package. But notice we have not broken it down to the lower levels. At that high level, we will break it down with the passage of time. So, for example, if we are working on a project, and this is taking place in the year 2015, this is taking place in the year 2013, this is taking place in 2020. We could use progressive elaboration to progressively elaborate on this and also this, which means we may not decompose this planning package in totality until we begin to move towards 2020, maybe 1 year out or 2 years out. We know that it has known work content. We know the value of the work. We understand how much money is involved, but we haven't broken it down into a lower level of detail. And that is synonymous with the rolling wave planning. So when you think about progressive elaboration, rolling wave planning, think about those planning packages containing known work content which will not be decomposed until we move closer to it. So if we say that's an element C, right, and we call this C.1, C.1 we would call a planning package. This one would call a work package down here. This would be a planning package. This will be a control account, the control account level, and this will be the root node. So for the exam, you do need to understand the difference between a work package, a planning package. Work package is at the lowest level, planning package is at a higher level. The control account is at a higher level than the planning package. The control account is at a lower level than the root node, okay? Something else you need to know is what we call the code of accounts. So if we're going to number this WBS here, we can number it in this fashion using the code of accounts. And it could look like this. This could be 1. The root node is 1 in terms of numbering. This will be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. If we take a look at the next level down, this would be a 1.3.1. This would be a 1.2.1, a 1.2.1 here, 1.2.2 there, 1.2.1.1, 1.2.1.2, 1.2.2.1, and you just follow it all the way down the chain. This would eventually be 1.2.1.1.1, and so on. So when you get down to the lowest level, if you count the number of digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that should tell you the level in the WBS that you are. For example, if someone says you have a WBS component, 1.3.1, what level in the WBS is it? It is level 3 because it's got 3 digits. If someone says 1.2.1.1, what level is it? You just count the digits, okay? So I've mentioned a number of things today: root node, control account, planning package, work package, and the code of accounts. Okay? And those are all very important when it comes to scope management and the WBS. The same way you can find out the health of the entire project is the same way you could find out the health for just one particular branch in the WBS, okay? So take a look at the screen here. Let me explain further. When we take a look at the WBS, in the initial phase of the project, we develop a WBS based on the basic scope that has been defined, and in subsequent phases, we update the WBS through progressive elaboration based on additional scope information that is made available. When we take a look at the WBS, it represents a clear description of the project's deliverables and scope. It describes the details, the project's outcome or scope. It organizes and defines the total scope for the project, and it subdivides project work into smaller, more manageable pieces. What about these terms here? When we talk about a deliverable-oriented hierarchical decomposition of work to be executed, we're talking about the WBS. The WBS organizes and defines the total scope for the project, and each descending level represents an increasingly detailed definition of the project work. So in other words, here, at the root node, you had a very high level of the work, the high level of work understanding. As you go down here, you're going to a lower level with more understanding, more detail. As you go down, each progressive level goes into more detail. All right? Still on the usage of terms, when we talk about a deliverable, because we talk about the WBS being a deliverable-oriented hierarchical decomposition, by deliverable, we're talking about a product, service, or result that meets a need or performing a service or something like that. When we talk about oriented, the word oriented means focused towards the concern and interest of a specific group. When we talk about hierarchical, we're talking about according to successive levels or layers. As you can see, these layers, when we talk about the hierarchical, we're talking about the different levels in the WBS, okay? And when we talk about decomposition, we're talking about dividing the work into smaller, more manageable pieces. So taking a look here, when we use the word decomposition, we're talking about subdividing the project work into smaller pieces. Also in the world of the WBS, we talk about discrete effort, which is work effort that is separate and distinct and related to the completion of specific WBS components and deliverables. And then we use the term level of effort, support type activity that does not produce definite end product. So we could be talking about a service of a particular piece of equipment. It doesn't really produce any definite end product, and that is level of effort. Still on our definition of terms, when I use the word WBS component, I am talking about any and all of these different boxes. These are different components. They are all components of a WBS. You could use the term WBS elements or WBS components. It is referring to these different boxes in the WBS. All right? What about work package? Take a look at the definition. It says a deliverable or project component at the lowest level of each branch of the WBS. How about WBS elements? Same thing. When I talk about component, element, I'm really referring to the same thing. Now take a look here. If we can look at a mock-up WBS that I've got for you here. And this is really more of your WBS at a level 4. It doesn't go down to 5 levels. A WBS for a wedding. It's a mock-up WBS. Wedding bell of James and Mary. So that is a WBS. You can see the root node is wedding bell of James and Mary. You can see we've broken this down into different phases, and each phase goes into progressively lower level of detail until we get to the root node and so on. All right? So that's your WBS. Talking about levels of the WBS, we've got the upper levels, which reflects the major deliverable. We also have the lower levels, which go into more detail, so that the upper levels provide logical summary points for assessing performance and communicating. So here, for example, is a great point for you to assess health of the project and to communicate about the overall deliverable or phase take a look as we go into the lower levels, we talk about providing appropriate focus for project management processes. So by the time you begin to go into your work packages, we're talking about lots of detail that enables people to carry out their project management duties. Okay? What are the benefits of a WBS? The benefits of a WBS are better communication. It enables you to communicate better with sponsors, stakeholders, team members about the project. It's more accurate estimation of tasks, risks, timelines, and cost than just taking a stab in the dark. This is a more definitive approach to identifying a lot of risks or talking about what the project entails. What about increased confidence that 100% of the work is identified and included? The WBS does that for you. And it's a foundation for the control processes within the project. In fact, previous company I used to work for, our projects used to thrive on the WBS. Not only did we use the WBS to plan the projects, management used these control accounts to monitor the health of the project. In fact, we had control account managers across the different control accounts that rolled up to the project manager. So on very large project endeavors, using a WBS gives you great visibility of who's in charge of which phase or which deliverable, and ultimately gives you a good picture of the project health from a managerial perspective. Okay? So that's what our WBS does for us. It gives us that increased confidence, and it's just a great way of defining what is in the project. What are the roles of a well-designed WBS? It decomposes the overall work, clearly and comprehensively defines the scope of the project. It supports documentation of accountability for the various deliverables. In fact, if you took this WBS and you took the OBS and you put an OBS on its side like this, kind of like this. So you've got your organization breakdown structure and your WBS. If you look at the intersection points, you can actually create a responsibility assignment matrix by doing that, because the intersection points of these elements and the different parts of the project, you could actually assign an entity or entities to that, and that's how our RAM is really developed, our responsibility assignment matrix. All right? Let's take a look at what's next. Provides structure for organizing information regarding the project's progress, and it supports tracking of risks. Another thing to be aware of here is the 100% rule. One of the most important principles guiding the parent and development, decomposition, and evaluation of the WBS is really the 100% rule, which means if you have a WBS like this, the lower levels in each branch should add up to the higher level. So if I add up the cost for 1.2.1 to the cost for 1.2.2, I should get the cost for 1.2. If I add up the cost for 1.2.1 and 1.2.1.1 and 1.2.1.2, add them together, I should get the cost for 1.2.1 and the effort. So the addition of the lower levels adds up to that of the higher levels. And the work represented by activities of each work package must add up to 100% of the work necessary to complete the work package. So when we talk about a WBS, there are different ways we can view a WBS by hierarchy. We could outline the WBS in a way that is not necessarily graphical, and it could be tabular in form. But anyway, here's an example of another WBS. You can see how the work is broken down. The big thing here is really the tree structure. If we take a look at the different elements, I've already shown you this on the whiteboard. The green would be the work package, the blue would be the planning package, and the red would be your control account. And of course, your root node would be that dotted line, the black dotted line around the automobile project. Okay? So let's wrap up scope management. What do we need in scope management to do well on the exam? To do well on the exam, you need to understand the 5 processes in scope. You need to understand what it means to put together requirements, to put together a scope management plan, to validate the scope, who is doing it, and what are you doing, or what is the customer doing, because it's really your customer that is inspecting the deliverable. And also you need to think about controlling scope. What does it mean to control scope? Your WBS, another big piece of scope management. Your scope baseline, like I mentioned earlier, a whole bunch of things. So I hope you get the idea. But that's scope management for you. Next, we'll be moving into time management. We'll talk about network diagrams and ADM, PDM, and all that stuff.